Hey everyone, and welcome back to the deep dive today.
Yeah.
We're taking a little trip through time. Not literally, of course, but we're going to be exploring letters written to the future. You know those messages people write
Right.
to their future selves or descendants or even just whoever might stumble across them years down the line?
Yeah.
It's all about connecting across time and leaving a mark on the world. Kind of like what we do here at Capsule.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's that human impulse to reach beyond our present moment, to leave something behind, to connect with the future. And what's so fascinating is that these letters, they're not just about preserving the past. They're also about shaping the future.
Okay, so let's dive into some real-life examples. Remember that story about the guy who found a letter hidden behind a cupboard during renovations?
Yeah, Carl Skivington. He found Deborah Stokes' letter from 1982. Imagine finding a message from almost 40 years ago, just tucked away in your own house.
Like finding buried treasure. Only instead of gold, it's a glimpse into someone else's life.
Yeah.
Stokes even wrote about the price of milk and bread back then.
It's those little everyday details that really bring the past to life, isn't it? And her letter ended with this hopeful line. I hope the world is a better place by the time you see this. I like to think it will be.
And get this, Skivington actually found Stokes on social media. They met up decades after she wrote that letter.
Yeah.
Talk about a connection across time.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
And it just shows how these letters can create these unexpected and meaningful connections. They're not just words on paper, they're little threads that weave together the past, present, and future.
Okay, so we've established that finding a message from the past can be pretty amazing. But why would someone even write a letter to the future in the first place? What's the point?
Well, think about it. It's a chance to reflect on who you are right now, what you're thinking and feeling, what your hopes and dreams are, and then years later, you get to revisit that. See how you've changed, how your perspective has evolved.
So it's like a conversation with your past self. That sounds kind of trippy, but also super interesting.
It can be both. You might laugh at your old self, you might be surprised by how much you've grown, or you might be reminded of dreams you'd forgotten.
And for people writing to their descendants, it's a way to share family history. Pass down wisdom, leave behind a piece of themselves, right?
Exactly. It's a legacy project, a way to connect with future generations on a personal level. I came across this beautiful example of this. A mother who wrote a time capsule letter to her 3-year-old son. She included pictures and talked about what his favorite toys were, what made him laugh, all those precious little details of his childhood.
Oh, that's so sweet. I bet that letter will mean the world to him when he's older.
Absolutely. And then there was this grandfather who wrote a letter to his teenage grandson, filled with stories from his own youth and advice for navigating the challenges of growing up.
It's like having a direct line to your ancestors, their voices whispering across the years. And speaking of voices from the past, we can't forget about community time capsules.
Those are fascinating. It's when a whole community comes together to preserve a snapshot of their time. I read about this project in Fishers, Indiana, where they partnered with Connor Prairie, a living history museum, to create a time capsule that won't be opened until 2073.
Wow, 50 years from now, what kind of stuff did they put in it?
All sorts of things that represent their community today, letters from residents, photos, even artifacts that capture their local culture. The CEO of Connor Prairie, Norman Burns, wrote a letter talking about their efforts towards sustainability, diversity, and inclusion, hoping those values will still resonate in the future.
That's awesome. So these letters are not just about looking back. They're about sending a message of hope to future generations.
You got it. And then there was this incredible story about a time capsule that was opened after almost 110 years. It was from Greenview South Elementary School in Ohio. They found old newspapers, letters, and even medicine bottles from back in 1915.
Can you imagine the thrill of unearthing something like that? It's like holding a piece of history in your hands.
And the coolest part, a 104-year-old woman who was actually a student at that school when the time capsule was buried got to be there when they opened it.
Wow, that's amazing. Talk about a full circle moment. Okay, so we've seen that these letters to the future can be personal. They can be about family. They can be about a whole community. But let's get specific. What makes a letter to your future self truly meaningful and effective? What should people keep in mind when they're writing one?
Well, one of the most important things is to be genuine. Don't try to write what you think your future self wants to hear. Write from the heart. Share your true thoughts, feelings, even your anxieties.
So basically just be yourself. Don't overthink it.
Exactly. Remember even the things that seem mundane now, like what you had for breakfast or what's stressing you out at work. Those could be fascinating to your future self.
It's like those old home videos where you're just watching someone do their everyday thing, and it's somehow captivating because it's a window into a different time.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Imagine your future self reading your letter and being able to answer those questions, creating a dialogue across time.
Oh, I like that. It's like sending a message in a bottle. But instead of tossing it into the ocean, you're tossing it into the future.
Exactly. And the best part is, you're guaranteed to get a response eventually.
So it's like having a conversation across time. I love that idea. But let's be real. Sometimes it can be tough to know where to even start with something like this. What advice would you give to someone who's sitting down to write a letter to their future self for the first time?
That's a great question. I think a good starting point is to think about what you want to remember about this time in your life. What are the big things happening? What are your goals and dreams? What are you struggling with? What brings you joy?
So it's not just about the big milestones. It's about capturing the everyday moments, too.
Exactly. Those everyday moments, they make up the fabric of our lives. And they're the things we tend to forget as time goes on. Think about it. Do you remember what you had for dinner a week ago?
Probably not. Unless it was something really memorable, like a disastrous cooking experiment gone wrong.
Right. So in your letter, you could write about the things you don't want to forget, your favorite song right now, a funny thing your kid said, a book that's inspiring you.
It's like creating a time capsule of your current self. So when you read it in the future, you'll be like, oh, yeah, I remember that. I was really into that band, wasn't I? What was I thinking?
Exactly. You might cringe, you might laugh, but you'll definitely get a sense of who you were at that moment in time. And another tip, don't be afraid to be vulnerable. Share your fears, your doubts, your insecurities.
Yeah, those are the things that make us human, right? Nobody's life is perfect, even if it looks that way on social media.
Absolutely. And years from now, those struggles might not seem as big or scary. Reading about them could even give you a sense of perspective and show you how far you've come.
It's like, hey, past self, I know you're freaking out about that job interview, but guess what? You totally nailed it. Or I know you're heartbroken right now, but you're going to get through this and you're going to be stronger on the other side.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It can be incredibly empowering to see how you've overcome challenges and grown from your experiences.
So it's not just about remembering. It's about learning from our past selves, too. And I bet that's especially true for people writing to their kids or grandkids. It's a chance to share those life lessons, those hard-won pieces of wisdom.
Absolutely. It's a way to guide them, encourage them, and let them know they're not alone in whatever they're going through.
And it's not just about the serious stuff, either. You can share funny anecdotes, family traditions, those little quirks that make your family unique.
Yes. It's about passing down that sense of family history and identity.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the content of the letter. But what about the practical stuff? Like, how should you actually store it so it survives for years to come? Because let's be honest, nobody wants to write this heartfelt letter only to have it fade or crumble before it even reaches its destination.
You're absolutely right. If you're writing a physical letter, you've got to think about preservation. First off, use good quality paper and ink. Acid-free paper is best because it won't yellow or deteriorate as quickly. And archival ink is fade-resistant, so your words won't disappear over time.
So basically, treat it like a precious artifact. Because it is, in a way. It's a piece of your history that you're sending into the future.
Exactly. And where you store it matters, too. Keep it away from direct sunlight, humidity, and extreme temperatures.
So basically not in the attic or basement. Got it.
Right. A cool, dry place is ideal. And you can even put it in an acid-free envelope or sleeve for extra protection.
It's like giving it a little suit of armor.
And don't forget to label it clearly with your name, the date, and who it's for. That way there's no confusion down the line.
It's like providing instructions for your future self. Open this on your 30th birthday or read this when you're feeling lost.
Exactly. And speaking of the future, let's not forget about digital letters.
Oh yeah, those are becoming more and more common. But how do you make sure a digital letter doesn't get lost in the abyss of the internet?
That's a good point. Think about it. Technology changes so fast. A file format that's common now might be totally obsolete in a few years.
It's like, remember floppy disks? Or those little zip drives. Those are practically ancient artifacts now.
Exactly. So with digital letters, you have to be even more strategic.
Okay, so what are some tips for preserving digital letters for the long haul?
One important thing is to choose a reliable platform, one that's committed to long-term storage and data security. You don't want your precious memories disappearing because a website shuts down or your files get corrupted. And here's another tip. Regularly update your files. Every few years, transfer them to a newer format.
So basically, you're future-proofing your digital memories.
Oh, okay.
And speaking of the future, I'm curious, what role do you think AI will play in all of this? I mean, technology is always changing. So could AI be used to create or preserve these letters to the future in some way?
That's a fascinating question. Imagine an AI that could analyze your past writings, your social media posts, your photos, and then generate a personalized letter to your future self, highlighting key moments and insights.
Wow, that's kind of mind-blowing. But wouldn't that take away some of the personal touch? I mean, part of the beauty of these letters is that they're written in our own words, right?
That's a valid point. I think the key is balance. AI could be a tool to enhance the experience, not replace it. For example, it could help with translations. So your letter could be read by future generations who speak different languages.
Oh, I like that idea. So it's about breaking down barriers and making these messages accessible to a wider audience.
Exactly. And who knows what other possibilities will emerge. Maybe AI could even help us create interactive experiences like virtual reality time capsules that allow future generations to step into our world.
Okay, now that's just getting futuristic. But it's exciting to think about all the possibilities. And it all comes back to this idea of connecting across time, leaving a mark on the world, and sharing the things that matter most to us.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another important aspect of writing to the future, especially when you're writing to a wider audience, like in a community time capsule. Being mindful of your perspective and potential biases.
What do you mean by that?
Well, we all have our own unique worldview, shaped by our experiences, our culture, our beliefs. And those perspectives can influence how we see the world and what we choose to share.
So it's about recognizing that our viewpoint is just one of many.
Exactly. And when we're writing to the future, we need to be aware of that. We don't want to unintentionally impose our own biases or assumptions on future generations.
So how can we avoid doing that?
One way is to be conscious of the language we use. Are we using words or phrases that might be offensive or insensitive to future audiences? Are we making generalizations about certain groups of people?
So it's about being respectful and inclusive in our language.
Exactly. We want to create a message that resonates with people from all walks of life, even those whose backgrounds and beliefs might be very different from our own.
And it's not just about language, right? It's about the content itself.
Absolutely. We need to be mindful of what we choose to highlight and what we might be leaving out. Are we presenting a balanced and nuanced perspective on historical events? Are we acknowledging the contributions and struggles of diverse communities?
So it's about telling a more complete and inclusive story.
Exactly. We want to avoid perpetuating stereotypes or erasing the experiences of marginalized groups. It's about creating a time capsule that reflects the richness and complexity of human history.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Why write to the future? How to write a meaningful letter. Preserving physical and digital letters, being mindful of our biases, and the role of AI. It's clear that this whole idea of communicating across time is a lot more complex than it might seem at first glance. But what I find so inspiring is that at its core, it's all about connection, about leaving something meaningful behind and about sharing our stories with the world, even if that world is yet to come. It's like we're all part of this giant relay race, passing the baton of knowledge and experience from one generation to the next.
And these letters to the future, they're like little messages tucked into that baton, giving future runners a glimpse of what the race has been like so far.
And maybe, just maybe, those messages will help them run their leg of the race. A little bit better, a little bit faster, or even just with a little more heart.
That's a beautiful way to put it. So as we wrap up our deep dive today, we want to leave you with this thought. What message would you put in that baton? What do you want to share with future generations?
It could be something big and profound, like your hopes for the future of humanity. Or it could be something small and personal, like a funny memory or a piece of advice that's helped you along the way.
Whatever it is, take some time to think about it. Because your story matters, your experiences matter, and your voice deserves to be heard even by those who haven't been born yet.
And if you're looking for a safe and secure way to send that message into the future, check out Capsulora. We're building a community of people who are passionate about preserving memories and connecting across time.
It's a community where you can connect with other people who are interested in exploring the past, present, and future.
We've got forums where you can share your stories, ask questions, and get inspiration for your own time capsules.
And we're constantly adding new features and resources to help you preserve and share your memories in meaningful ways. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Capsulora for more tips, inspiration, and behind-the-scenes peeks at what we're doing.
And don't forget to leave us a comment and let us know what you thought of today's deep dive. What message would you send to the future? We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. Until next time, remember, it's all for what matters most.